Hi RSpec users. In this video, we'll discuss some of the new features in this release of RSpec. The main feature in the release, of course, is the presentation manager, and there are several other videos on that topic that you can watch. First off, you'll notice these two new buttons under Auto Open. These allow you to change as well as open the folder that RSpec is monitoring for new files to open. In the past, you had to climb down to the options screen to do this. These buttons are just shortcuts to that options screen. It's easier and faster to get your data using these buttons. I'm very careful about adding new things to this main RSpec screen because each new thing is yet one more item that can intimidate or confuse a new user or add clutter to even an experienced user. But these buttons seem so tiny and so helpful that I relaxed a bit and added them here. And here's another interesting enhancement. Anywhere in RSpec where you click to see a list of recently used file names, like here, if a file is no longer available, RSpec dims out the file name in the list. So for example, this file is no longer available. Why bother dimming them? Well, users, including me, can get frustrated when they click on a file name if the software just says, sorry, that file can't be found. I mean, why should the software give us an option to load a file in the first place if the file is no longer available? Now, suppose when you look at this list, you want to know what folder the files are in. For example, you see two files that are the same file name, so you don't know which folder each came from. Or it's a dimmed out file name and you want to know where did it used to be. While you're clicking on this triangle to open the list, hold down the Shift key. The list will now show you the full path to each file. Here you can see that these two files are in different folders. This can really help you manage your files as well as actually find files when you can't remember where you put them. And further, suppose you want to clear this file list because it's too cluttered. If you hold down the Shift key when you click on any of the files here, this pop-up window appears, giving you the option to delete all the files from the list or just those that are dimmed because they're no longer where you originally opened them. Now, it doesn't delete them from the hard disk or your solid-state drive or the cloud, wherever the list is. It just removes them from this list. And here's another convenient feature. First, I'm going to show the measure lines by clicking here. And now that the measure lines are visible, for some time now, RSpec has allowed you to click here and then click a second time on Enter and then type in the location where you wanted the measure lines to be positioned. I'll enter, for example, 700 and 800 and click Apply. Now the measure lines are positioned. There are several rough edges that we've polished on this pop-up. First, if you want to avoid having to click once to pop up this submenu and then clicking a second time on Enter, you can now hold the Shift key down when you click the first time, like this. The Enter screen pops up immediately with no additional input necessary from you, saving you a click. And now, here on the Enter screen, you can use the Tab or Enter key to move vertically from field to field. That's the Windows standard, and if you're doing much on this screen, I'm sure you'll welcome how this speeds up your data entry. We have some users doing a lot of work with the measure lines, and they use this screen often. Making the data entry process smoother makes them faster and more accurate. And while we're on the topic of measure lines, let's open the Appearance screen. Here on the Graph tab is a new option to change the width of the measure lines. As I increase this value, watch the lines here get wider and then thinner. I know that grabbing these lines to drag them into a new position can be challenging because they're by default pretty narrow. By making them wider here, they're easier to click on to drag. Okay, so let's turn those measure lines off now. And although it's not a big deal, when you right-click on a profile title or label text, we've added the Greek letter eta to the list of Greek letters. Now let's move over to the Labels tab. I'm going to load this layout that I prepared earlier. You can see I have 3 labels. Now suppose after creating those labels you decided you wanted to position them all in this top region up here, say where this one is. Rather than having to drag each one at a time, being really careful to get them all aligned when you were done, that can be time consuming, of course. you can use the Copy All button, which has been enhanced. First, I'll make sure that the label I want to match, that I want all the others to move to, is selected here. Then I'll click on the button. This second option has been added. If there's a check mark here, then all of the other labels will be moved up and down and left and right to match the current label. So these two will move up and their horizontal position will be set to match the targets. Let's watch. I'll click on yes. So here you can see these moved up and now both are the same distance from their vertical line. Why is this feature helpful? Well, if you watch the Presentation Manager video for this release, you saw that you may have a lot of labels that you want to move around all at once. Similarly, as some RSpec users are using dozens of labels to identify features, like this one of the sun, being able to move them around all together can save a lot of time and hassle. There's been a minor bug fix on this screen too. When you open a .dat file with this icon, in the past, if this appearance screen was visible, it wouldn't get updated with the new layout and colors. Like I said, this was a minor bug, but it's a nice one to have fixed. And this is a really esoteric feature, but if you're creating your own .dat files or 1D fits files, maybe in Excel or from some Python code you wrote yourself, or perhaps you're downloading .dat files from online sites, those files look like this. It's in a text editor here. I'm going to show all the characters. So the change here is that this tab can now be a comma. Pretty nerdy feature, I know, but one that can make some people's lives a lot easier. And since we're on the topic of .dat files, when you drag and drop a .dat file from the Windows Explorer to this screen, if you hold the Shift key down, the file is displayed as a reference profile rather than the main profile. In fact, this is a good moment to mention that if you're not currently dragging and dropping files into RSpec, you're missing out on a potentially big time saver. Let's look at this folder in the Windows Explorer. These are all .dat files. I can just click and drag holding the left mouse button down into the graphing window. The same drag and drop capability exists in the image window too, the video window, and the presentation manager for zip, fits, .dat, and presentation files. When you're managing a lot of files, especially if you have two computer monitors, opening the Windows Explorer to a folder of interest and then dragging and dropping the files that you're interested in can be really convenient rather than the hassle of using the open button like this one to climb through the files. Okay, now I'm going to open the math screen. If after you've done some math on the screen, when you click here to move the results back to the main profile, RSpec will now automatically close the reference profile that was used in that math but is really of no longer any value. If you do a lot of instrument response calculations, this will save you a step and some of the hassle. Okay, let's open the magnifier screen by clicking on this icon. There's a minor change here. With all these radio buttons, you can change the width of the orange lines. As I click on the different options, watch the lines change in width. If you're trying to precisely position the lines, this can be helpful. But notice that when I click on this 1, the lines seem to disappear. That's because with the image down at this scale, the lines are too thin to be displayed. But if you enlarge the image by zooming in, the lines will reappear. Here's another new interesting feature. In normal use, we leave this box checked so that the y-axis is automatically scaled. But suppose you were collecting a series of spectra and wanted to display them all at the same zoom level. First, uncheck this box. Notice this new Set Zoom button that appears. When I click on it, this window pops up. Here I can enter the zoom position that I want. For example, let's zoom in on just this visible region of the profile. I'll set the x-axis from 600 to 1200, and the y-axis I'll set from 0 to 4000. When I click on Apply, you can see the graphing area is now zoomed to just include that region. This feature is a good example of the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets greased. Even though these are gears, not wheels, and even though we'd never use oil like this on our sacred telescopes, would we? It's a great image, isn't it? Which is why I included it. And the reason it applies here is that it was just a few weeks before this version of RSpec was released that someone on our forum discussed that they needed this on a series of images that they were capturing over time. My point here is that if you have things you'd like to see in RSpec, or there's a rough edge you'd like to see polished, I hope you'll reach out and let me know. It's only the feature requests that someone asks for that actually get implemented. So you're invited to email me with what you would like to see in the next release of RSpec. So those are the new features in RSpec. As always, I'm happy to hear from you with any feedback about the software or any questions that may have come up for you. Thank you all for your continuing support and enthusiasm. I continue to love the field of spectroscopy, and I'm also honored to be able to provide you with a tool that allows you to enjoy and learn from this exciting field.